Welcome to Confessions of a Cyberpsychologist. I am Carolyn Freeman, and today I am chatting with Dr. Jessica Piotrowski about communication in a digital society. Jessica is a professor and chair of communication in the Digital Society at the University of Amsterdam. She's also the director of the Centre for Research on Children, Adolescents and the Media, and director of the Graduate School of Communication, as well as the co-director of the Faculty Teaching and Learning Centre, the faculty lead for the National Human Factor in New Technology Sector Programme, and the co-principal investigator of the Youth Digitally Research Priority Area at the University of Amsterdam. She is also the principal investigator for the DigIQ project, which is the measure of digital competence with young children. She works with the European Commission, Google, Meta, YouTube, European InSafe, and NASA, and she sits on numerous national and international boards. Welcome, Jessica. I'm so delighted to have you on board.
Thanks for having me today.
Jessica, you've just got so many titles and so many things that you do, and I don't think I could come close to covering all the work you do. But before we get chatting about your work and research, can you tell me a little bit more about who you are and what that pivot point was that sent you down the road of media psychology?
Oh, wow. The pivot point happened years upon years ago. So I'm a professor, as you mentioned, at the University of Amsterdam. I've been here for 13, 14 years, something like that now. And my focus has been, since my graduate school days, on youth and media. Always has been. The digital space came as young persons were adopting digital technology. But the actual early days of how I found the field was I was an undergraduate in my bachelor studies. I think it was my second year course of study. I entered a course called Children and Media. It's like one of these many courses you could take. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And the first day I sat in the back of the room like I did usually in my classes. I was like, yeah. And then the second class, I was the first one. I was like, I want to know everything. I just loved the idea. And the course for me was really talking about how the role of media in young person's lives, but also the art behind the creation of this content. And I remember in a class learning about Sesame Street and just thinking, there's so much more to it than I ever knew. And that led me down this rabbit hole of, okay, I need to know everything. And I actually thought I was going to work for companies and I would maybe somehow create content or advise on content. And then what I realized is I really enjoyed the science behind understanding how it helped young persons or not and when, and that I had more of the hat of a researcher in that space. And so I stayed in academia and yeah, here I am.
There's so many people who I've spoken to have done exactly that. They've just got, I was planning on doing this, and then, I got stuck in academia, and because I love it, and I just love it,
Yeah.
hearing more and learning more, and I want to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah, and I also really love teaching. That's the thing about being a professor. Like there's this, if you can't explain your work to your students, you can't explain you don't know it well enough yet. It's just how it is. And so, and they inspire me too. I mean, they make me feel old these days, to be fair, but they inspire me and it's a part of my job that I just truly enjoy. So I don't think I could ever fully leave. I could never leave academia, in part because the classroom is so special.
Yeah, and it's passing on that knowledge to the next generation.
And it's also learning back, right? This very cyclical space that it's always there's just something magic of the classroom.
There is, absolutely. And you talk about the power of translation with your work, and specifically from research to teaching, teaching to research, research to practice, and that we do best when we lean into those links. Can you talk a bit more about what you mean by this?
Yeah, well, I mean, the example we just talked about was teaching, right? So the research to teaching link, I think that's a very natural run. If you're lucky enough to be a researcher or know what's happening in the research space and bring that to the classroom, it's just when you really let it happen, you learn from both sides, right? You educate your students, but how they receive it helps you understand things differently too. And it might change the way you ask questions. It might change the wording you use, how you talk about it, what you understand. So I think that's just a natural space. But for me, the research to practice space is one that the field I study is so natural, but I see so complex. I mean, in any given day, I'm probably talking to maybe a platform or a producer or a policymaker. That will daily happen in my life. But it's taken a very long time to build that network. It's taken a very long time to assert myself as an independent scholar who you cannot basically say, oh, do this work for me. It doesn't work that way. It's taken me a long time to learn how to translate, right? The art of translation is not just about me providing information to persons about what I've learned, but it's me active listening. And that's really, it's a skill, right? Because it's not just the art of listening that we teach our students. It's also understanding and learning about the complex network that other persons work in. So when I'm working with medical practitioners, for example, I need to understand the challenges that pediatricians face if I'm going to offer ideas. If I'm working with platforms, I have to understand the parts that they're struggling with and be able to have a real holistic dialogue that is not solely critical, for example. It has to be true listening and receiving. And so, but my work is better for it, and I think the space is better for it. So yeah, these sort of reciprocal transactions are crucial. So I spent quite a bit of time on advisory boards, attending these sorts of open meetings, sitting in as a expert in many different things, which I don't love the title. I just think we all have different expertise, but often that's what I'm positioned in, to hear and share. And I learn just as much as I give, I think, in these things, sometimes even more in learning.
And you recently presented a keynote at the 14th annual Media Psychology Conference, where I first heard you speak, and I was so blown away by your message. And your main message was about the competence and not control that should guide our future regarding social media for young people. And you began the talk with a focus on Australia's social media ban and made some really great points about why there is this moral panic around curbing social media for young people. Could you share a bit more about your thoughts on this?
So I think the starting point is that if people follow my work or follow what I'm going on, they know that I'm against the social media ban holistically. That is often what I'm sort of becoming known for. And I always want to caveat by saying, it's not that I think social media should be everywhere. It's not that I think social media is doing great. I'm not pro-tech. I'm also not pro-policy or pro-ban. I'm pro-kid, right? I'm thinking of the young person in this. So so there's a lot of work that shows, for example, that social media or really any phones in the classroom is quite problematic for their learning process. When they're trying to learn algebra, getting text messages is a problem. I fully agree with phone pockets or having no phone policies in the classroom. This is empirically supported and it benefits the young person. I'm completely supporting these things. So but what I'm struggling with is the language of banning that we see happening in, I think, 14 countries and counting now, if I'm correct. You'd have to fact check that. Where what's happening is there is a rising concern about the role of social media in the lives of young persons. That is a fair concern. That is a fair concern. There are problems in the social media space. Young persons themselves are stating certain problems. There is also a rising mental health crisis that we see for persons under the age of 25. This is also true. Why is it rising? Are we detecting it more? What's going on? It is rising. But the relationship between these two is not as some of the popular narratives suggest. The empirical data by far does not support that social media has caused mental health problems. That link, that is correlation, that is not causation. And the data keeps coming out showing that this is, I think a data study just came out last week again, which was, again, we don't see this. One of the studies I think that came out of the UK said the relationship between social media use and well-being for teens is the same as eating potatoes and well-being. Like there's just more than that. So what worries me is that the underpinning of this argument is based on if we remove this, we fix mental health. The fact of the matter is if we remove this, we won't fix mental health. And I really would like to see us working towards supporting mental health. So I think we're picking the wrong, this is not going to fix it. But what I recognize is the banning language is taking force because we do see struggles, right? We see the young persons struggle to stop. We see that there's problematic content in these spaces. We see that parents are struggling to figure out how to stop the use of this or curb and finding healthy balance. It is indeed the case that there are struggles. So I think what you see happening is people lean in and say, yeah, this is such a headache. Let's get rid of it. I feel that. And I recognize that, and I can appreciate that confirmatory bias. I can appreciate that sentiment. So I fully understand that's where we are. But when you actually get into the conversations and you talk to parents, like my own data is showing that, well, about half of parents would say they're in favor of a ban. Nearly all are in favor of many other things. Nearly all are in favor of support at schools, support for themselves, having the platforms do more. Nearly every parent is in support of a much more holistic response than a simple ban. And the banning, the control, What also worries me, besides the fact that it won't fix the problem that people think that it might fix or that started the dialogue, also, in doing so, what I worry is what will happen instead. Teens, their entire job is autonomy, right? They're working to become autonomous adults. I assure you, if you ban it, they will find a way. They will use VPNs. They will use fake accounts. They will go to other less safe places in the internet where we have less regulation and less idea of what we're doing and actually put themselves at more risk. If I thought that banning would help other things for young persons, I would be all in. But I don't think it helps. I think it actually puts them at greater risk. And in my pro-kid space, I say, I don't think this is the way forward. It's not. What I am happy about, though, is this conversation is finally happening. And I do believe that multiple places and spaces are listening. That I'm glad for. I am glad we're having the conversation because I want to hear how platforms respond to the challenges and say, we can do X instead. I want to hear how schools say it and say, we can add this. I want to hear how parents and pediatricians and policymakers, I think it's getting voice. So for that, I'm quite happy. But what I'm worried about is this sort of like, we've banned it, we've solved the problem. Control historically has never worked and has never been an effective response to any moral panic. But competence, which is more complicated, probably more costly, and far more nuanced, likely will work. Namely, thinking about age-appropriate content more. Thinking about the use of age verification tools perhaps as one piece of a solution. It is not a whole solution because it leaves a lot of persons off the boat. Thinking about how do we give kids skills? How do we talk to them when they get smartphones? How do we talk to them when they confront content that makes them uncomfortable? How do we normalize saying, this, I don't feel good about this. What do I do about it? How do we give them the competence, the digital competence to navigate this world? Because if I don't give you any space when you're a teen and then you're 16 and suddenly go ahead, good luck, what are we doing? Right now, if you make this analogy of a car, the car is kind of broken, right? There's things aren't going right. And we're basically saying, oh, the car's not working right, so we're not going to let the kid in at all. But when they're 16, they can get it in and good luck. What I kind of want is I want to give them the skills so they know how to drive, and I want to fix the car. And I kind of want both things to happen. And so I'm basically pushing for people to recognize banning won't solve the problem, but it looks like a good headline. But if we can instead think about what are the solutions in schools? How do we help parents? How do we push platforms to do more and take more responsibility? How do we have regulation that helps do this along the way? How do we have this really holistic ecosystem? I think it takes longer, but I think we get a better outcome. So my push has been competence over control. Now, I will say that I do recognize that some people say, look, things are rough right now. I'd rather ban for now until things get fixed. I hear that sentiment. I'm just not sure that I think people don't realize how complicated this is to really do. And I am quite worried about where kids end up if we don't do this right.
I think because I often talk about it also in terms of cars and saying you don't at 17 give a child the keys to your car and say, have fun, bye, see you later. You teach them the basic rules of the road from when they're young. You teach them how to observe when a car's coming, how to cross the road. You kind of build that up, that competence and that knowledge over time.
Perfectly okay to say to kids, look, social media, any technology besides when it's teacher approved in the classroom is disruptive. And the thing that I want to do though, is I want to be able to say to young persons, we're not using phones right now because what research has told us is this is how it works with your brain. And I want to explain, and you need this skill now because the rest of your life, there will be technological interruptions coming and we all got to learn how to do this, right? I want to autonomy supportive teaching where you help them have some agency also, and you explain why you're doing things, is even restrictive policies that are autonomy supportive matter too. It's the explanation that ties with it. And these things I think are really, I think this is the better route based on the science that I know and based on everything I see. But I also recognize that what I have to say is really hard because ban is easy to write about.
It is. And it is a knee-jerk reaction that's quick and easy. And I think a lot of parents want a quick and easy solution rather than actually putting in the hard work and kind of going, actually, I need to educate myself on why.
And I
it's
fully
like,
get it too, right? Being a parent is so freaking complicated right now. I fully get my parents are like, are you kidding me? Have you seen my day? I don't have time to learn about the new TikTok trend and worry whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that in my soul. So for me, it's also about thinking, what else do we do? How do we help parents? How do we help platforms? How do we? So part of the reason I believe in translation is if a platform really wants to talk to me and is truly committed to rethinking their approach so that not that the voices of young persons are on some final advisory board and kids said, I like this, the end, but are truly part of this, then I'm in to help.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think that like it's a complicated solutions. But what I always say to everybody is I rarely know difficult questions that have easy answers.
Exactly that. Yeah. And on that note, the current political focus on young people and smartphone or social media use has been a lot of frustration, has led to a lot of frustration amongst academics who are specialized in this field, and yourself included, who believe that the science is more nuanced than what is presented in, for example, Jonathan Haidt's book and the interviews and presentations he's done. You shared, it seems to me that you really share this frustration. But what advice would you give to politicians and parents regarding teens and smartphones and social media use? What is the top thing that you really want them to know?
Yeah, I find this. So I think there's multiple things. I want to be careful not to criticize any one person because I recognize that always feels. I think Jonathan, I haven't met him personally, but I've talked with his assistants and stuff. I think these are good people who care about kids, right? I don't think anybody gets into
Indeed.
this. I mean, at the end of the day, I
Yeah.
think there's good people who are caring about kids. What I
Yeah.
recognize
Agree.
in that book, which I have, it's on my desk right now, and I've read it. And in fact, I agree with much of it in there. I actually can find and really read. But what I disagree with is there are some findings, we call it cherry picked, meaning they're selected to highlight something. Others that should be in there are not there. Often the analyses are not always with young persons, but they're with adults. That's a very different sample. Often there's a very wide net cast for what is mental health and well-being, and the outcomes are quite different. And there's some very large scale data now really coming out that's showing, okay, it's just not as X leads to Y like this. It is, I think, very fair when you read the book and read other content like this. Social media use is a problem that has struggles. Young persons are increasing in their digital involvement, and there are things going wrong there. I fully agree. There's also challenges with mental health. Fully agree. But I want to really be careful that we suggest that there's been a planetary rewiring of childhood because of digital technology. And I want to lower that threshold a little bit here. So I think there's nuance to be brought. And I ask policymakers, one, to appreciate the nuance and look at the science that's coming out as well. I also think that policymakers themselves, I fully understand, are maybe not always aware of all the nuances of technology. Fully accept they're doing exceptional work in other spaces, and I don't assume that they know precisely how an algorithm works. But I would love it if they invite myself or my very experienced colleagues across the globe to talk with them, because I would be really quite happy and fully understanding that of course you don't know all this stuff. I can't imagine everybody knowing everything, but this is where we can learn together, because when you say something like, I'll ban anything with an algorithm, I'm not quite sure you understand what you're banning.
Exactly
And
that.
when you decide, for example, Australia has been debating back and forth and recently took the decision that YouTube is social media. I can have an opinion on that, but I would remove that opinion for a second and simply say the fact that couldn't decide is it or is it not falling in this definition suggests to me that they needed more conversations about precisely what the concern is. Because what I do know is young persons who connect on something like WhatsApp or any of these devices to talk to their friends actually strengthen friendship. So it's not all bad. So from policymakers, I think what I want them to know is I think the headlines help highlight that there's something to be discussed and to look at, but the devil's in the details, and to reach out to the scientists to really understand what are the best solutions here. And the right researchers will understand there has to be you have to be able to find a way to make policy workable, which I understand. So reach out. And from parents, I think, first of all, I think parents have a very difficult job these days. The tips I offer are for the ideal situation for the parent who has a moment, and many parents don't. If your child does not have a smartphone yet, in the moment your kid's getting a smartphone, that is an amazing moment to have a conversation about the house policies that you have for the phone, because they are interested. They have an intrinsic motivation to get the phone, and you have the moment to say, let's talk together about what our policies are and what the repercussions are. What your value system should be on that should reflect who you are as a family. It's different for different families. Is it we charge all of our devices together in the kitchen at night? Is it that there's no phones at the table? Is it that when you're using these apps, I want to know what they are, and we're going to use whatever Google's Family Link or so-and-so for Apple or whatever the products are? Or is it going to be, I just want you to know sometimes things are not great online, and when you don't feel good, come talk to me about it. You will not be in trouble for someone sending you a direct message that you didn't like, but I will help you figure out how to block that sender. But maybe the other parents say, I don't feel technologically competent enough for that. I think that's also okay. And so in those cases, I would say around the world, depending upon where you're from, there are really excellent parenting resources, parenting groups, getting key tips and coming up with the top 3 things. So don't feel bad if you don't know. So if you do feel comfortable in the space, have conversations with your kids as soon as they're getting the phone is a great time. If you're not sure, look into the resources for the top 3 things. Email me. I will talk. I mean, like, I really think people will happily help you figure this out. But don't feel bad if you're not sure. I mean, what are we doing with generative AI right now? We're completely unsure together in this thing, but we can think through about what feels right. Line up with your value systems in your home. I do think what we see over and over again is the most effective forms with teens, especially who are desperately craving autonomy, is autonomy supportive parenting, saying, and restrictive based. This can be both active and restrictive. This is what's allowed and this is what's not. And let's talk about why. But I would always say in all cases, remember that you are a modeler of the behavior. And exactly. I think that that's something where we were doing some work where we were watching parents and kids get their first smartphone and negotiating it. And the parents said, look, I really don't want a phone at the table. Like, it's family time, no phones at the table. And the kid's like, okay, but then the same goes for you, Mom. And I think that that's not to blame a parent, right? Like, it's really not a blame of a parent. It's to recognize this technology has come into all of our lives. And we're all figuring it out. So have the dialogue if it feels like it fits in your style of parenting, and recognize your own use of the devices too, and recognize you mirror this out. And we are models to young persons, and don't feel bad, right? If you spend a half hour one night and you needed Instagram videos that made you laugh, that's also okay. But let it be okay for your kid too, and talk about, like, we have to normalize this a little bit. I really just don't want parents to feel pressure. It's hard enough.
Yeah. I've read some research a little while ago, and I can't remember where I read it, but they were saying that when a teen is involved in creating the digital phone usage in the household, they're actually more likely to buy into it and actually input stricter rules into the whole phone process than parents do. So kind of getting your children involved in the rulemaking of the house, and as you say, kind of working in the family values of what that means and modeling that behavior as well is such a key thing to
immediate agreement, they call it. There's even like examples. It's like, and it doesn't have to be just the phone. It can also be the time spent on video games. It can also be the rule about when you're allowed to watch television, whatever it is, YouTube time, whatever is the special thing in your home. But young persons, you give them agency in this and help them understand. And in that moment, you might talk about, I know you really want to use this product, this app. The reason I'm concerned is because I've read in the news this, or I've seen this happen. How do we prevent that? And what do we do if it happens to you?
Yeah, exactly right.
In the ideal, everything is butterflies and rainbows world, is that when a young person wakes up one morning and they see they've been enrolled in a group on some app, and it's a group that upsets them with messages they don't like, that they go to you and say, can you help me unsubscribe from this? And that you don't yell at the child, because the child didn't do anything wrong, but you instead say, I'm so glad you came to me. Let's figure this out together. Yeah. Because then you normalize that we're all figuring this out. And then the next time something happens, they come back. And I hope that we have less and less of these times, because it shouldn't be all on the parent, right? I'm hoping we do more and more in the platform space too. And I will give the platforms credit. I see them working on this. But we need to talk with them more about what we need and really have healthy dialogues about that too.
The other thing that I've noticed that some of my friends do who are parents is they actually tell their child what they're doing in the phone. So if they're at home and looking at their phone, they won't just look at it. They'll kind of say, well, I'm just quickly checking emails, or I'm just looking at this, I'm just looking at that, to kind of, because you don't know what someone else is looking at. And the child, as you kind of were saying earlier, models that behavior. So as it's kind of an openness with your children in terms of your digital technology use, and also an accountability.
I think
to the family narrative.
Is something we really want to see more of in general. Intentionality is super important for all of us. But I think when you become more aware of your own media use, you also decide, is it important right now for me to check my email right now? Right? Is it really? And I mean, I'm guilty of this. I mean, I talk to my students every day, and I ask them, what's the first thing they do in their morning? They say, I looked at my phone. They say, why? I say, it was for my alarm. I said, great. Did you turn it off and go back? Did you get up? No, I was then on XYZ for 20 minutes. And I think, me too.
Yeah.
So I want to be careful that we don't all feel guilty about everything. I want to make sure that we don't all feel like we're all trying, especially parents. If you ever pick a group that couldn't care, they are doing everything. Like they are the group. They are doing everything. So I'm really careful with the blame game there. But I will say that intentionality and just reflecting on your own intentionality and modeling it with young persons. What young persons tell us a lot, and one of my colleagues do work on this, is they struggle to stop. They struggle to kind of get off the spaces that they're in, which is a platform design conversation I think we should have with platforms. But we know that intentional use it's absolutely okay if you had a bad day and you use an app to watch funny dancing dogs for 20 minutes just to feel better. But that's good, right? That's okay. Right. And it's also great if you're chatting with your friends or maybe you're doing homework together. I know young persons that set their phone up and they do homework with their friend like they used to it's the intentionality of use versus wasted time.
Yep.
And the wasted time space, digital overuse, we call it, that's the stuff I'm worried about. That's the stuff that's sort of counteractive with well-being. So how do and we all have it. This is not a young person. This is all of us. We're all struggling with overuse. Platform design helps, regulation helps, self-awareness and intentionality helps. And the more we help the next generation who's growing up with this do better and being able to say, this is off for me right now, whatever this is. And the more we help them find balance, the better we do for digital well-being.
You do a lot of work with big tech, so some people may say that your viewpoint is biased by your involvement with them. Do you feel you're able to present an unbiased viewpoint on the impacts of smartphone and social media use to young people?
Yeah, because I don't work with big tech. I think that's maybe the big phrase. People often rephrase it that way, but I don't work with them at all. I do advise, but I advise from the space of being an empirical scientist. So it's publicly registered. People can see this. I have a long time ago really decided I cannot critique a system that I don't understand. So when I've been asked to advise, I do, and I advise on what the science is. So I have a contract. It is completely independent. I do anything I want. I say anything I want. None of the companies can use my quotes for things. None of the companies can never do anything. That's just not allowed. I'm not a rubber stamp approval. I can absolutely say I disagree holistically on anything at any moment, and I do. But what I see is I work specifically with consulting with or advising, I would say. I advise trust and safety teams. So who are really thinking about the trust and safety of young person. So I work with, I will say, really interesting persons. So I talk with them, I advise them who really care about young persons. And what they are often asking me is, what is the state of the research about X, Y, or Z? How do you understand it? So I have absolutely I'm completely independent and actually in everything I do and in everything I say. It's basically, I advise in that I meet with different platforms. Right now I publicly advise Google and YouTube. These are related entities, but different products on their, I forget the exact title, Youth and Family Advisory Board or something like that. And what I do is I meet with them when they have questions about the science. And it might be a range of questions as they're thinking about product rollout or as they're thinking about what is harmful, right? And they're thinking about what should our policy be? And I will very easily say, I think this is holistically problematic and you should not do this. Now, what they do with this information, that is on them. I don't work with them. It doesn't work that way. I have no idea what they're going to do with it. But I will say, from the science, this is what I know. And I also will say, from the science, I don't know. Yeah, so when people ask me about this, I always say, well, I advise, for sure, scientific advice. I fully, and I have to say, it's increasingly sensitive that I do this. I live in Europe, and in Europe, there's quite a bit of conversations about media sovereignty and really breaking tech sovereignty. And there is a sensitivity that I do this, and I am struggling with it myself. Because my value system is such that I don't believe that what I learn as a scientist should stay in journals that are only available behind paywall. Because at the end of the day, if I want to help kids, my pro-kids starting point means talking to all the persons involved, whether it's the pediatrician, the policymaker, or the platform. But I do recognize that people often may say, oh, she must be biased because she will go talk to somebody. And I recognize that. And the best thing I can always say is I advise. I don't work for, I advise, I don't make product. I will tell them absolutely what I dislike, and I have no problem speaking my mind. But it is increasingly sensitive. And I recognize that. And I worry about that because I worry that my own self will at some point say, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore because I worry about the optics, even when I actually know that, for example, I advise YouTube and and this is publicly available. People can find this online. They were working on their YouTube Kids space. And they said, we got to think more about the algorithms and we need to understand what we recommend and what we reduce. I'm simplifying here, but to give you a big sense. And they really wanted to know, they worked with a team of us scientific experts from around the globe. And they wanted to know what makes good content for kids. Not what makes popular content, not what makes engaging content, not what makes click-through content. What is healthy content for kids? So that's different. I don't care if healthy content is popular or not. The question was, what makes good content for kids? And we all advised on this is what good content is, and this is what is problematic content. That led them to developing their principles of good content for young persons. Again, shorthand, it's all online on their website to describe it. And they ultimately rebuilt their system for YouTube Kids platform. And you'd have to check the data specifically, but I know that after X number of months, the quality of content for young persons improved by 40% that they were being exposed to. 40+%. Exact details are online. For me, that was meaningful because I used what I know from the science about what makes good content. And I used what I know from the science about what makes bad content. They know what is engaging. They know what gets clicks. They know what gets spread. I'm not talking about that. I'm looking at a young person with content. And they changed their algorithm and they updated it. And it means that kids are getting better content. That feels like what my work should do.
One of the challenges you had at the Media Psychology Conference at the end of your keynote talk was to the academics in terms of trying to get the insights from academia out into kind of the real world. So what do you think that academics could do? What could they do more of to try get this knowledge out for parents and for educators and for governments and politicians and whoever else in media?
Yeah, the thing is, as scientists, they just worry we're going too slow. The thing is, the
Yeah,
peer
agree.
review process takes a while. The quality research takes a while first. Peer review takes even longer. And what I'm worried about is the space is changing so quickly that if I wait until the peer-reviewed article comes out, that I am too late. And so my challenge to people is to identify what are the key questions we have right now and how can you think of multiple ways of disseminating? Can you do podcast? Can you do a vidcast? Can you, if you feel comfortable, can you post things on your website and share on your LinkedIn if you build a network? Can you go to conferences like I did and put calls out to people and some people felt my keynote was rather controversial, to be fair, because I definitely was not maybe a standard keynote. Can you go to the places and spaces where platforms or policymakers are attending their conferences and not be in the necessary academic circle and go and raise the points? And not everybody has the luxury to do that. I am a full professor with tenure and a secured position. My assistant professors who work in my department or my PhDs absolutely don't have neither the bandwidth or the security to do certain things that I could do. So I don't assume that all persons can do it. But if you have the tenured space and the knowledge to be able to say, listen, this is coming out and this matters, then I encourage people to do it. And then for those who don't yet have the space, that's what I think part of my role is. Like, I look at the work that comes out of my colleagues and I think I will share some of it because I have the capacity to do so right now. But I also think it's about really recognizing if you go to some of these sessions, you can take inspiration on what we should be asking right now. I sit at some of these advisory board meetings that I go to, or I sit at some public policy workshops that I attend, or I just went to an event 2 weeks ago where it was like a knowledge sharing across the entire Netherlands on youth and media. All kinds of different persons were there from every aspect of policy and practice. And you hear what's coming up. That inspires new research. Do it as soon as you can. And I think sometimes as scientists, we let perfection or the chase for perfection be our so-called enemy of good, right? We say this phrase a lot. And I see that happen a lot where as a scientist, I for so long was like, I'm not sure yet. My data leans this way, but I should probably do a replication and I should probably do it with another sample and I should probably check this measure. And so we wait and we hold it because I can't, because as a scientist, we are trained. Set up your hypothesis, gather your data, test it, go through the cycle again and again until you're really sure. I'm not sure we're going to be really sure fast enough. So maybe what we need to do is be able to say, I'm not certain yet, but the trends are here. And with what I know right now, here's what I would advise. Maybe we need to be a little bit comfortable with with saying we're not ready for perfection yet.
And kind of getting those insights, even if they're snippets of insights, out into the public domain, rather than, as you say, waiting for the whole peer review process, and then it's stuck behind an academic firewall for 5 years before it actually gets out in another source, because it's changing so quickly, especially with Gen AI. We can't wait. There's no time.
No, I
So
think that we're really, I mean, I have so many concerns right now that are sitting here, and I'm at meetings all the time. I don't know what it means that young persons can generate video so quickly right now. I don't know what it means that you can generate video so quickly right now, or me. I don't know what it means when it's so authentic looking. I'm so vastly concerned about misinformation and disinformation and what that means as a global threat, and how none of us, I don't know how to check things anymore. This idea of check it by looking at the links or something, this is going away very, very quickly. And people saying, oh, but that looks generated. Okay, this year, but this will change very fast. And the notion of, okay, well, now we'll ban all of these tools. Like, this is never going to be. So I really, really think we need to be getting ahead real quickly and talking about this. What am I supposed to do as a professor now that generative AI is available? What am I supposed to do in the classroom? Do I write papers still? How am I supposed to guarantee the value of the degree if you could have generative AI write a paper for me? These questions are happening right now in this very moment. And researchers, scientists are exceptionally well trained to answer questions using the best methods available. And we are also exceptionally well trained to wait as long as possible until we are absolutely certain. And I believe if we can get the media to allow us to convey some nuance, it's very hard to do in today's clickbait headline world. If we can get policymakers and practitioners to understand we're not sure yet, but this is evidence-based, and let's be willing to make changes as we learn more. If we are willing to say, let's make a policy that has enough balance that as we learn more, we will shape the contours more. Yeah, that's what I think we need to be doing immediately. I'm very worried that if we keep waiting until we have the perfect answer, that we'll have waited too long.
Also, coming from kind of a marketing background, it's one of my defaults is it has to be perfect before it goes out. And I have to retrain myself to just this is good enough. It's going out because the message is more important than the perfection.
I will say, as an academic, though, putting things out there these days, I am increasingly aware of keyboard warriors who come back at me. That is tough. And I have been doing this for 20 plus years, and still it can be tough, right? Because if I do, so I say this knowing this is a goal for myself, and it's a goal that I try to pitch, but I don't think it's easy because I recognize, especially when you hear that I'm a professor, there is sort of a halo effect that happens there. And then you identify that and the notion of me being able to say something is imperfect is really unaccepted. I'm a professor, therefore I'm a scientist. It should not be the case. And if I want to put something out there and say, this is what I know right now, and we need to grow into this, I will be, as soon as I post anything on any space, I immediately brace myself for keyboard warriors coming back at me. That is also not easy. Academia in general is currently under a lot of threat. We're under a lot of fire as academics. And I have to say, some days it is like, I will think, I'm not going to post this right now because I don't have the energy today. So I also say in all of the things we're trying to do in this pro-kid world I sit in, but also just pro-science world that I'm in, I recognize there's a lot of challenges right now, and self-care matters in all of this. So I think people should only lean in when they have the capacity to do so, and it's absolutely okay to say not today.
You're involved in the Children, Adolescent and Media Division of the International Communication Association. What does the work that ICA do, and why is it important for us to have associations that do research and communication to young people?
Yeah, so I'm one of the original founding members of CAM. I'm one of the original chairs of CAM many, many years ago. So that's my baby. I'm one of the original founders, and it's a very special place in my heart. I think what CAM does is the International Communication Association is exactly what it sounds like. It's people who study communication science from multiple angles around the globe. It's a conference that comes together once a year. And it's, look, media space is so integrated in what we do globally. It's probably one of the most powerful spaces we have as scientists, really understanding the social, like how we engage as humans. CAM is one of the divisions that really focuses on young persons and their relationship with technology. It is global in nature, which means that you're getting work from around the world. It is incredibly powerful to see how people study these questions from different places around the world, how powerful culture is, how different methods, different ideas, different voices of young persons. And so every year, CAM meets somewhere as part of ICA. Every year it's a different location. And for 4 days, it's just all day geeking out. I mean, it really is a geek's heart, right? Because it's just science being presented. And CAM is a special division in that everyone there is just so committed to young persons that there's just this deep connection also to each other. So the mentoring is great for early career scholars. Everybody's friendly. I mean, it's kind of a conference where everyone's just running and hugging each other, right? It's this lovely space. Like people are just happy to see each other. But the work is so interesting because you begin to see how around the world people are battling similar questions. How where you see it's the first moment you'll see 4 presentations in a row on a similar topic and you'll be like, they found the same thing. That's interesting. There's replication there. Or you'll begin to see and say, oh, interesting. That worked differently in these countries. What's going on? Why is it different? Is it measurement error? Is there something cultural happening? And then that's what you start diving into. So I think CAM at ICA puts a space for where this work can be and where you can find it in a very powerful way, in a very prominent space. And it really is just some of the top scholars I've ever met around the world. And I get to work with them and it's just fun. I go every year. I've been going for 20 years and I go every year.
So you've written about what children's rights should look like in the digital age. If you had the power to make one law or regulation globally, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I saw this question coming in and I love the question and I don't have the answer. And I wanted to have some super sharp, lovely answer that could be repeated everywhere. I just don't think it's that simple. If I thought one law could do it, I think I would already be pushing for it. I think my standing practice remains it's just not that simple. So I wanted to have something snazzy and jazzy and perfect. But the actual truth is that it's just really complex. And that there is no one law that's going to fix things. It's going to be all hands on deck.
Yeah. And there's so many different people and organizations and policies and politics and everything that has to come into play because there's so many, as you were talking about, so many nuanced things that impact on our digital technologies. Even the behavior of parents impacts.
Work together without people assuming that we're biased by working together. I wish we could work together where everybody could listen to each other and just really hear it, right? So there's never going to be one thing. The answer is going to be in everybody understanding everything and then picking little pieces that we can, I was listening recently to someone who works at trust and safety at one of the platforms, really somebody I've known for quite some time, formerly an academic, and she described the Swiss cheese model, where she said, if we're going to try to protect kids, you got to imagine Swiss cheese, the cheese with the holes in it. And she says, it kind of layers on top of each other. And the goal is to cover the holes. Something's going to work for some kids, something's going to work for the next, something's going to work for the next. And if we do this right, if we get the voices from all the different people together, we figure out the different Swiss cheese layers we need, and we level them up. And then what we do is we are able to sort of mitigate the risks for a wide array of young persons. We're able to do what the promise of the general rights for young persons is, right? That they should be able to participate in the space. They should have the provision for the space, and they should do so while it's protected. Right now, what I see is the protection paradigm and the participation paradigm are knocking heads. They're really struggling to find a way forward. I think there is something very interesting in thinking, okay, let's level this. So we enable participation while protect, and that we don't assume any one thing will work, but we assume a combination.
I love that Swiss cheese analogy.
Yeah.
It's that just, the picture in my head just makes so much sense, just having all these different layers, because it's about layering the kind of digital nutrition across the board, across so many different people. Understand, like you were talking earlier about teachers understanding why or the impact that digital technology has, so they could explain it in the classroom and say, this is why you can't have your digital phone.
To do that, we need to make sure teachers have enough resources to be educated for it and have time for it. And to do that, we need to have policymakers who identify this and put it on that space. And to make sure they do that, we need to have policymakers who understand the challenges. To do that, it would be great if the platforms got on board and it's just, this circle just keeps going. And that's where I think leveling it up, both in terms of how we engage in participation and how we engage in protection, is probably where the right answer is.
I love that. Love it. So as we move deeper into AI or generative AI and a kind of immersive media, virtual assistants, augmented reality,
Mhm.
which technology or trends do you believe will have the largest impact on children's media experiences over the next 10 to 5 to 10 years?
The generative AI, whatever it looks like next, I think what we see right now is nothing of where we're going to be. I will watch this video in a decade and see if I was right or wrong.
I
But I
think
think
probably in about 2 years' time, not just a
yeah,
decade.
exactly. Generative AI, because generative AI is pushing the ability to create at a whole new level, right? We can generate together, we can generate with this technology. The whole idea behind this, right? This natural language responses we get. There is so many opportunities and so many concerns I have right now. My stomach is flipping. I feel it in both ways. I understand why using generative AI is more popular than Googling, so to speak, because you don't have to think about search terms. You just ask a question and it can figure this out. It can figure something out. But we also know the level of AI competence you need to understand what training data is, why it's biased, how it can get it wrong. There's just so much there. The amount of training we all need to understand how we use this technology is massive. I also think that we have a real historic question coming up about what are our values as humans. A colleague of mine was talking a lot about you have to decide what's the skill you're not going to let go of and what's the one you're going to say it's okay to let go of. And I was thinking a lot about that. And he was saying to me, I'm an academic. Critical thinking is crucial to what I do. That I'm not going to outsource to a large language model. But writing an email, that I might outsource. And this conversation about what does it mean to be authentically human and what value system are we going to hold and what skills are we going to say are ours and what skills are we going to say we can outsource, I think we really need to talk about. There's always been conversations with every technology. There's something gained and something lost. I've said this many times. Historically, we see this, right? The ability to write change, the ability to how we engage. But this might be changing things in ways that we really need to pause and say, we value this so much, we will adjust our education systems for it. Or we don't think this is so important and we will lean in here and help multiple sectors. There's so many opportunities. Think about the opportunities in the mental health sector when waiting lists are so long. And research makes it so clear that having a sparring partner to talk to can be incredibly helpful. And imagine if this large language model is trained exactly on the texts that psychologists are trained on, and then benefits from reading massive number of articles from active psychologists, and somehow is trained in such a way where it serves as a proxy until one-to-one support can be given. Imagine where that could go great, and imagine how that could be devastatingly problematic.
Yeah.
If I pick something that I think will shape everything, it's the generative space that we're going to.
And we just don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to get there. And that's
No,
the
I think what I worry about. So I run the human factor and new technology sector line here in the university. It's one of many things mentioned at the beginning of that long bio. And part of that dialogue is about keeping persons in the discussion. What I see is technology is developing so fast. I'm not sure our ethics or ethical responses are developing as quickly. I'm not sure that our policy spaces are developing or our social spaces are developing. Tech is moving forward and we're running after it, and that worries me.
And considering that we're only now getting to the point where we're really chatting about social media for teens, and Facebook was launched in 2006, 2007, and we're 20 years down the line, and we're only now getting to the point where we're having these deep conversations that we're wrestling with. So how long is it going to take us to get Gen AI ethics and behavior and insights sorted?
Exactly what I'm wondering. That's why I really believe that having multiple persons at the table early on, bring the scientists on board, have the platforms, even if we feel certain ways about it, because we got to hear that perspective too. Bring the policy perspectives, bring the parents, start surfacing these conversations now.
Yeah.
I think we just need to respond faster, and we need to be willing to say we don't have all the data yet, because getting all the data to be able to prove the 15-year study on effects is going to take 15 years. But what can we do now? And what can we do with the data we have? What studies can we commission now? How can we think about the amazing scientists we have around the world? how can we bridge forces here and say, what can we do now to understand what's best for all of us, and be willing to say we might change our ideas on what's best based on culture, based on time, and multiple things. Okay, like allow parameters to change, but let's not wait to start thinking of them.
Oh, exactly that. So, talking about your research focuses on how cultural differences influence media selection, use, processing, and kind of the subsequent effects. Can you talk a little bit more about your research and the kind of top line findings that you've had over the last couple of years?
No, because that would probably take another 3 hours. But I think the short version is, for a very, very long time, we really treated all persons a little bit too soon. And what we actually know, statistically, we can now model it, but individually, we probably always knew this. Individual persons, based on how they develop, based on who they are as persons, based on the culture all around them, shapes who they are. This shapes what you choose in the media space. But it doesn't shape just what you choose. It also shapes how you respond to that content. And that response, that black box moment, you consume something and there's an effect. There's something happening in the middle, the processing. That processing is also shaped by who we are. So if you have two people in a movie theater watching a movie, they both arrived there for different reasons. One maybe went there because this is the greatest movie that they could not wait to come out. They're massive fans. Another maybe went because their friend brought them along. So they have a different starting point, which put them in that room. Both are now consuming it. One, maybe an avid fan, knows all the characters, has real parasocial relationships. Something happens to this character, the character dies in the movie, is full out crying, the ugly cry in the movie, fully in it. And after the movie is just shaken by what happened. The other person who didn't really know the character, watched it, thought it was sad, goes home, just drops it afterwards. Really low effect. Who you are is shaped by your development, your disposition, and by your cultural spaces around you. This shapes what you do, and it shapes how you respond to it. And that, in a nutshell, is what my colleagues have defined it as differential susceptibility to media effects. You are differentially susceptible to what's going on. And if we really want to understand the relationship between media and young persons, we need to be sensitive to those differences.
There are researchers around the world who kind of really focus on their cultural nuances of social media use or technology use. And often we kind of take those little snippets and we kind of translate and say, well, actually, what's happening in the US or the UK or Europe is applicable for China or India, but actually it isn't. There are so many nuances.
Yeah, exactly. It's not always. It depends on what's the driving force here. There are many things between the UK and the Netherlands that would be quite similar. And you'd say, well, in these facets it's quite similar, so maybe it works. But in other cases, it can be quite different. So I was advising recently on whether or not you should allow cursing, so foul language, in content that young persons consume. Well, this is very culturally dependent as to whether or not it's considered problematic. In some countries, it's like, yeah, that's the way a kid's having a little bit of an edge. I'm going to let it go. They're 13, whatever. They've said X, Y, or Z. But for other countries, it's a hard, absolutely not. This is absolutely inappropriate. So whether or not that policy is suitable and how that defines problematic content or inappropriate content in this case has a cultural shaping.
I never thought about it that way. So, and you're also interested in the contexts that support young people's experiences with digital media, kind of identifying risks, resilience, and enhancement factors that allows youth to become engaged digital citizens. What are the main risks and how can young people build greater digital resilience?
Another very complicated question that needs a book. So what I'm usually looking at is sort of what we call double dose effect. There's a lot of things going on that young persons will have, and you're usually trying to understand what exacerbates the challenges they have. So for example, if they are growing up in what we see right now in the Netherlands, for example, is that young persons, the educational level of themselves, we also see educational level of adults, seems to be associated with lower technological skills right now, or digital competence more appropriately. That is an interesting factor for us to understand more. What's happening about that? How do you define lower education? That's complicated for this conversation, but nonetheless, different types of education levels seem to be associated with digital competence. Trust in technology is also a very interesting one. When you see too much trust in technology, so you can have sort of on one side very blind trust, everything is great. This leads to less safe behaviors because you're really not being aware of the risks. Or the other hand, I don't trust anything, which leads you to missing out. One of my colleagues studies something called calibrated trust. So this healthy middle ground amount is usually associated more with a healthy better digital competence. So what we usually look at with these risk, resiliency, and enhancement factors is trying to understand what puts you more at risk. So for example, having far too much trust in technology, which helps you be more resilient, which is often a personality trait. What are things that you can handle a little negative feedback, for example, and what might enhance better experiences, which might be calibrated trust. So we break it through, and it really depends quite a bit on the technology and the platform even. But the idea here is, again, to tap into the fact that not all young persons are the same.
And it kind of also, as you said, goes back to the cultural understanding and how much digital literacy they have and how much exposure they have to digital technology, because not all of them have.
It's completely different. And then also you grow up in different households with different values about technology, and you grow up and learning different things. So this all shapes that very much. And this is not per se bad or good. And I'm also always really careful. I look at risk more as a way of saying, okay, let's make sure we support these persons. Not that they shouldn't have access to these things. It's more, okay, so young persons who are, for example, experiencing bullying offline are also more likely to experience bullying online. So that gives me a hint on who I should pay attention to. It doesn't mean I should say, don't do this. It's more, okay, how do I help?
And it's kind of going back to that example of driving a car, is that there are young people who die in cars on a regular basis. So you don't say, well, you can't drive a car, or some people might, but it's about mitigating the risks and helping them understand how to drive better and know what safety precautions to take if they're in those situations.
When every young person gets in a car, we automatically see what little supports they need. Every young person gets in the car for the first time. You're like, oh, this one's going to need more help checking mirrors. This one's going to need reminders on using the turn signal. This one's going to need more confidence. And this one I'm going to have to turn the music down for. So you start changing how you support them based on who they are.
Exactly that. So one of your areas of interest is digital competence, which is the combination of digital skills and knowledge needed to thrive in today's media ecosystem. How do you define digital competence in children and adolescents, and how has your thinking kind of evolved over time?
Well, I define it. You mentioned the DigIQ, I think you mentioned earlier in the conversation, right? And so what had happened is years ago, I really started studying this a little bit because I was really trying to understand, is digital competence one thing, right? Is it really just one idea? And the answer was really no, it's not actually, because you can. So I follow the European Commission's definition, the EC's definition on this, and I've really worked to study it here in the Netherlands. And what you see is being digitally competent involves a range of skills. It involves, for example, your strategic information skills. So can you understand what you're doing on a computer? Your critical information skills. Can you tell if it's real or fake, for example? Netiquette, your ability to engage, for example, with other persons online in a respectful way. Your creative skills, can you create in the space? Your online safety or privacy, how do you know how to protect yourself and your devices? Your digital well-being, sustainable tech skills, your problem-solving skills, your ability to handle AI, for example, your ability to handle generative AI, your ability to engage in the society through transactional skills. So what we've identified is that digital competence right now, from what we can see, is about 11 different dimensions. And there are 11 different sets of skills, knowledge that you have that work together to support or not each other. And what we're trying to do in the Netherlands right now, what I monitor is I'm looking at where we're strong and where we need some support. We're all struggling on AI right now, for example. Kids are really quite good with strategic information skills. They know how to work things really well, and they know how to get help really easily. But they are signaling that they're struggling with well-being, how to take a break, and they are signaling that they are struggling with knowing if something is authentic or not, for example, and a few others. So for me, digital competence is not one thing. It's a multifaceted set of skills we need to thrive in the digital space. And I'm working to measure it in order to understand who needs support, and then working with different entities across the Netherlands to see how we can support them.
Are those measures available in the public domain? So if a teacher, for example, wants to use it, can they access it?
Fully available for everyone, fully public. Okay. We also work with schools to take the tool and have a web variant of it that they can then use in schools, and we can help them take all the information and use it in a web variant for schools as well.
What are the biggest gaps you see either in research or in practice in supporting digital competence amongst young people?
Well, one, it's about making sure that we support schools doing this. And that's a big gap, right? Because it's not about putting it in one class, right? This is not one extra class. This is about integrating it into the curriculum. And that is very hard to do. It is very hard to do because when we have to decide what we agree are our skills we want taught, we need to recognize that every time we decide it, things are going to change. So we need them to be dynamic. We need to upskill teachers in that, and we need to resource them well. We cannot expect teachers to take anything else on right now unless we resource them. And I will not support a single policy that says do more without resourcing them. That's just simply, I find that absolutely a ridiculous set. Teachers are incredible. I direct the Teaching and Learning Center for a reason here. And our philosophy is like, for us, by us, we love teachers. So I will stand by teachers fully. So I think a big gap we have is figuring out how to put this in the curriculum and how to support teachers in doing so. The Netherlands has taken really important steps here, and we're seeing steps around the globe, but I think that is a big gap. That's probably a primary one for me, is helping. And then the secondary part would be finding ways that we can get information to caregivers, whoever that may be, in ways that meets them where they are. These like, oh, come to a parenting night, come to this session, read 20 pages online, go to this. They're so busy. Can we think differently about meeting parents where they are? There's a really nice initiative in the Netherlands that I've been talking about a lot recently. So people have probably heard me say it elsewhere. It's called Cyberouders, which is like digital parents or something like that, I guess would translate to. And it's identifying key people who have the skills or are willing to help each other, and then finding ways for parents to talk to each other. We're all in this together. So maybe we can enable more of it.
I think that's a really good idea, and I think that's something that's really missing around the world. So you're at the University of Amsterdam in the School of Communication Research. Can you talk a bit more about the Centre for Research on Children, Adolescents and the Media at the University of Amsterdam? So kind of what research does the team focus on, and what are they looking to achieve with their research?
The team is incredible. I think we're more a website than we are anything else, because we work together on everything, but we do try to update our website too. You name the research questions, they're probably in some way happening here right now. So it is a media psychologically based team. So they really are thinking about how persons confront, engage with, and understand media content. There's a lot of the work that we've talked about that I'm doing here with my team, but there's also other sub-teams. So there's work happening on, for example, the relationship with robots and robotics and what that looks like. There's work happening on digital disconnection, which I find super interesting, right? So how would you create systems that encourage you to disconnect rather than to connect, right? So thinking about redoing platform design in different ways. There is work focusing on the relationship between social media and well-being, and understanding this in very nuanced ways, thinking through different impact of different platforms, how it's used, how it affects mood, how it affects stress, daily and long-term as well. There's whole teams on that. There's also a lot of teams focusing on young adults, so sort of your 18 to 25 market, also trying to understand how they're experiencing what's happening right now. So we have a team studying, for example, solitude. Solitude is different than loneliness. There's a big notion of media makes us lonely, or media doesn't allow us to take a break and do the deep thinking. But this is a very crude idea. And yet COVID would suggest we probably did some solitude there when we had a lot of connection. Maybe there's more nuance in this. And so we have a team of researchers who are studying solitude in the space and what that looks like. We've done work on virtual assistants. So what does it mean to have these little devices in homes? How do they get there? And what happens when families have them? So yeah, you name it. It's focusing, I'd say, on as new technology emerges, it's understanding it's a group of researchers who are passionate about caring for young persons and identifying what empirical science we can offer that can help change the space that young kids live in.
Yeah. And you've got a number of programs available for students who are interested in studying psychology and behavioral science of communication, both kind of on and offline. Can you tell me more about the programs? Because I think you've got a BSc, a master's, and PhD students. So what can they expect to learn, and how can they register for these programs?
Yeah, so we have a bachelor program. We have two. We have one in Dutch and we have one in English. Our Dutch program is focused really especially anchoring and understanding the Dutch market. So for young persons growing up in the Netherlands who are competent in Dutch and really want to understand that landscape, it's really going to help you understand what's happening in the Dutch context. And then we have the international program, which is going to help you try to understand the parameters of communication science in a global world. What is happening? How are we understanding? It's not just youth and media focused at all. It really is the role of the media space we live in and how we all interact and engage with it. So the history of communication, the philosophy of what we study, but also the methods you need to know how to do this. We really are very methodologically rigorous. But then thinking through representations of different cultures. How do you communicate with different cultures? How do we interact with one another? What is the shaping mechanisms of this for entertainment, for health, for politics, all of these different spaces? So It's an incredibly cool program. I love it. I'm not even the director of that one. I am the director, however, of the graduate school. So I would say there's a bias there when I say the grad school is great because I am the director. And the grad school has a master's program, 1-year program, a 2-year research master program. So this is maybe if you want more research intensive space. And then we also have a PhD program that the grad school does together with our research institute. And there also, it's not just youth and media, but that can be a specialty you pick up. But I'd say we prioritize autonomous learning. What's your journey that excites you the most and how can we get you there? It's going to really come from a media psychology perspective in many cases, not always. But you're going to be able to really say, I'm interested in health and marketing and understanding that route, or I'm interested in the political space or in journalism. We also have a journalism school as well, but that's slightly more complicated, which I'm also the director of. But you can maybe say, I really care about political dialogue right now, or youth empowerment in a political space, and what is happening with digital spaces and politics today, or other spaces. We have a whole area of corporate communication. Think about the amazing and complex space corporations are sitting in right now and how we engage strategically, what that looks like, what is happening there. So we have different sort of tracks. We have a whole entertainment space, which I'm embedded in, which is thinking about the entertainment media we live and work with and how we engage with that in different ways. So students can come in. Look, the program is fantastic. It was fantastic before I was director. It will be fantastic after, because it actually has very little to do with what I steer. It has primarily to do with the quality of the faculty here. The University of Amsterdam, the Amsterdam School of Communication Research specifically, has really it's just recruited some just damn fine scholars. And these scholars also love teaching. So they're in the classroom. And so students learn from, I sometimes watch who they get to study with, and I think this is just cool, right? I mean, it's tough. We work them very hard. I'm the first to say, if you're looking for an easy program, don't apply. If you want to work hard and you want to come out feeling like you earned your degree, come join us. If you're just looking for a lighter load, this is not the time or place, because we work you hard. Spend a lot of time engaging critically. We want you to engage in critical thinking. We want you to learn the methods and the stats behind what we do. We want you to learn how you ask a good research question and how you answer it well. We want you to know what a good research practice looks like and what it doesn't. When you're done, you are far better able to engage in the scientific space around us in a range of spaces, whatever position you choose. So, but that's small group education, mostly really committed teachers. And I'm biased as hell because it is my baby in many ways, but it is sometimes I step back and watch it and I just think, yeah, there's something special here.
There's quite a few of the academics who were at the media psychology conference, and I went to a number of those talks, and walking out of them, I was just thinking, wow, they know some really interesting stuff. And they blew me away because it was just so fascinating, and the quality of the research was extraordinary. It was brilliant.
I mean, I wouldn't have left. I'm American. And I left the United States many, many years ago now. And I was recruited, and it was a very hard decision for me to leave. I am very family oriented. I miss my family deeply, and I miss going to soccer games for my nephews and seeing my sisters and going shopping easily. I gave up a lot. In fact, I was just there this weekend to see them for 3 days because I miss them so much. I gave up a lot, and I would not have stayed given how much I gave up if it wasn't such a powerful space to work in. So I make it work. I go back and forth across the ocean a couple times, and I use a lot of digital technologies to stay connected because there is something very special about this space and what has been created here. And it was here when I got here, and I think it will be here when I leave, whenever that space is too. It is a unique space to be a scholar and to be a student.
So where do you see the future of media and communication psychology going, especially considering the cultural leanings towards hyper-protection of children and media use?
Well, if you look historically, usually first we go to one side of the pendulum and then we go to the next. So we were hanging in the middle for a little bit, and now we're going to hyper-protection. We'll probably go back to hyper-empowerment, and then we'll recognize that we're missing the protection, and then we'll go back again. So I expect the pendulum to go back and forth again.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And Jessica, do you have any particular favorite media or communication psychology related books you normally recommend to others to read?
Yeah, you're right. I saw that as a prep question. I think you sent me as well. I was thinking about that. Honestly, my favorite book it's so old now. So I was actually trying to so Shalom Fish wrote a book years and years ago about children's educational television. And when I got that book, I should have put it out for the video. It's beaten up. I have loved this book so much. There's highlights everywhere and pages are wrinkled, and it's like my loved book. Shalom wrote this book. He had worked in industry as well, and he's also a scholar. And he wrote the book about how kids learn from educational television, how they actually learn. And when you read it, it applies to how we learn from everything can be educational. It's just a matter of what it teaches, right? That's the famous idea. And he talks through, if you're going to do it right, here's how you create it well. And I read that book cover to cover so many times because it has powerful anecdotes that take complex concepts and make it very manageable. And at the end of the day, it's such a clear idea on how you can have researchers, designers, and tech creators at a table who all ultimately want to benefit young persons. And if you take that space and you get all the different voices together, the people who know the science about how to teach numbers, and the people who know how to do beautiful visuals that encourage kids, and the tech creators who know how to make it really strongly and make it really fun, and you bring all these key voices together at the table, that's where the magic is, right?
Absolutely. And is the book still kind of really relevant in terms, even if you started reading it now, it'll still make...
I was just teaching 3 weeks ago in one of my classes, and I was still talking about this theory. Yeah, that's what's beautiful about it. It's a bit evergreen. Yeah, it's television, but he's updated it since to offer Capacity Model 2.0, which talks more about the digital space. But honestly, the key mechanisms, how we've learned as humans hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The space around us has, but who we are as humans hasn't. How we, what it means to make sure that you give space for the cognitive capacity needed to learn the good stuff and how you do that well, that remains the same.
Amazing.
It's one of these books that's forever on my bookshelf.
I'm going to have to go and find it and read it as well. Thank you for that. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me on Confessions of a Cyber Psychologist. It was fabulous to catch up with you, and I really look forward to chatting to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.